the Governor Walker has introduced a budget bill. The number of it is Senate Bill 30. And the Wisconsin legislature works off a biennial budget. So a budget bill only happens every 2 years. And so this is his cycle. So everything is focused on this budget bill that will be signed into law. It'll be done by July 1st, which is the state's fiscal year. So starting tomorrow, where Lynn will be testifying, there's a bunch, they call them road shows. And the Joint Finance Committee, there's 16 members there. You'll hear the media say the powerful Joint Finance Committee. And they are powerful because they really drive all the votes and fiscal decisions based on what Governor Walker has proposed in his budget bill. Hopefully you're all reading the newspaper. You see it's a pretty vitriolic time in our country, and it's no different here in the state legislature. People don't really get along all that much. And so it makes it very difficult. What's a little bit weird right now, because it's very important when you talk about contact your legislator, you know, you're going to be saying, well, what's my message? Governor Walker introduced his bill. It went over to the Senate. That's Senate Bill 30. However, the State Assembly has a speaker, Speaker Robin Vos. Robin Vos has already drawn a line in the sand and said, you know, we in the Assembly may not acknowledge that Governor Walker has introduced Senate Bill 30. We may just come up with our own budget. So that's a little confusing for someone that doesn't really understand the legislative process. And I'm just telling you all this because at the end of the day, what is really directly impactful for you is, and there'd been a lot of buzz about this, oh, we're gonna shrink government, there's too much regulation. And quite frankly, I was really tired of hearing about hair braiders. There was a lot of talk about the burdensome continuing education credits that hair braiders needed. It's like, deregulate those poor people, please. But everybody got thrown into the soup pot. And so what Governor Walker did, and everyone's really scratching their heads, like, why is he doing this? Because historically, the legislature has always said, we are not going to mess with people who want to license themselves. And there's a public safety aspect to this, isn't there? Yes. And you know, you hear the word massage therapist versus people uninformed who still call it, you know, a massage parlor, and there's all the semantics. I think very, very important in your messaging, which is separate from all the facts that are there. Again, big picture. Right now, the legislature is focused so much on all kinds of heroin and opioid abuse in the state of Wisconsin. It's really on the rise. I have been personally shocked by the high level of human trafficking. And one of the things I think of is you remove licensing of massage therapists, the good people who do all the wonderful things that you do, you're going to have a bunch of bad actors out there. And this is an element of society that is going to do harm. So if for no other reason than this is a consumer safety, consumer protection piece, it's just really kind of appalling to me. So anyways, I digress. Governor Walker, it was the old Regulation and Licensing Board, and now it's called the Department of Professional Safety and Professional Services, DSPS. And what he did is he consolidated a whole bunch of people into a medical, what's the name of your board that it doesn't even matter, you all got lumped together. So optometrists, physical therapists, radiologic technicians, athletic trainers, occupational therapists. So you're all going to get one vote on this newly created board if this passes. This cannot pass. We have to kill this. So imagine you're a massage therapist and you're on this board and you're supposed to comment on an occupational therapist's scope of practice issue or a physical therapist's scope of practice issue. You are qualified to talk about the scope of practice for massage therapy. That in and of itself. And I think of, you know, as we age, right, some of us, we need our glasses, and I'm thinking there is no way I would ever go to an optometrist who isn't licensed. But the public safety piece of this is bizarre. The other thing that Governor Walker proposed in his budget is he said that, well, you know, you really don't even have to meet You can just meet at the call of the chair. If you look at your licensing fees and what the cost is of these volunteer board members who give up their time, and they're appointed and approved by the governor and, you know, approved by the Senate. Why are we, the governor's budget says it will save, for all of these combined, we're shrinking government, not really. You're saving $25,000. $25,000. That is like a half a penny in state government spending. Maybe that's even too much. So I will tell you, Lynn and I were talking, and I wanted to have this letter up here. We really got it together quickly last week because everything is in real time. When the agency briefings were happening last week, all the state agencies came before the powerful Joint Finance Committee, and the DSPS agency was up Tuesday morning. We got this coalition, and the key was, and your letterhead's on there too, we had about 8 groups, and the co-chair of the Joint Finance Committee, John Nygren, said, and look at this, all these groups, 36,000. That's a lot of angry constituents, let me tell you. 36,000 licensed professionals in our state are really upset by what Governor Walker has proposed. So that's where you're all going to come in now. Everybody is cranking up the, I'll call it the grassroots, but I cannot underscore to you the importance of making phone calls. And for your colleagues who are not here this evening to hear this, you've got to talk this up. Because you're a part of a coalition now. We don't have a name. We all just know we want to keep the status quo and have our licensing boards. And you're only as strong as the weakest link in any coalition. Everybody's going to look out for their own profession. And the worst thing that could happen would be massage therapists think, oh, well, you know, the optometrists are making calls, or the physical therapists are making calls, somebody else is making calls. You have got, the squeaky wheel is going to get the grease. And what do I mean by that? If massage therapists do not make phone calls and contact their legislators and say, we need our licensing board, we are here, we are licensed, we protect the public, we know what our scope of practice is, we are legitimate, and we cannot go back, and there is no cost savings to the state of Wisconsin. You know what they'll think? Massage therapists don't really care. They don't really care if they're licensed or not. So you have to make those calls. You have to make those calls, because one of the things, as I was going around, Lynn and I were going back and forth with your talk point paper that I believe will be circulated or something that you can use in your talk points as well with legislators. Some of the officers were saying, oh my gosh, we are hearing from so many people already, and we're like, that is really good. Now, I think some massage therapists were absolutely calling, and that is fantastic, but I think you guys really need to ramp it up a whole lot more. And what is the timing of this? There was a hearing in Platteville on Monday. Tomorrow it's Milwaukee, and then there's a bunch of other locations around the state. Some of them are very small towns. I know Lynn is trying to get people in those communities. The reason they're going to those communities is there's a member on the finance committee who was from that area. So they wanted to show that they were kind of a big deal. So it'd be fantastic if anyone in those areas could go. You only get 3 minutes to testify, and all you really have to say is, we need to keep the status quo, our licensing board. And if you look at the kinds of complaints that the board has dealt with, these are not people that you want representing you in your profession. And that entire opportunity is going to go out the window if there's no licensing. So the opportunity to present your paper, and they have to hear it more than once, because now what's happening is they're getting a lot of noise. There's going to be so many changes to Governor Walker's budget bill, so many changes. Separate from you to be mindful of, and as you read the newspaper and hear the things on the news, the state of Wisconsin has a transportation budget that has a big red gate. And Governor Walker wants to bond a lot to solve this $1.1 billion hole. The hole was never fixed. When Jim Doyle was governor, some of you may recall the Department of Transportation has what's called a segregated fund. So that means you can't rob that cookie jar and go pay that bill. Well, at that point in time, Governor Doyle was short about $900 million in the Medicaid budget. So he went over and took the money out of the transportation budget and then balanced the Medicaid budget, but then that was never filled because they got rid of the gas tax. We have more fuel efficient cars, all that good stuff. So at the end of the day, somehow if a bridge collapses or something bad happens on our roads, something will happen. But the legislature, you've already seen in the newspaper, Speaker Voss has said, you know what? We might get enough people to do a veto override. We think we need to do maybe a gas tax, I'm not sure, but we can't just bond our way out of the problem. The Senate has said, oh no, we're not going to do a veto override for the governor. But at the end of the day, they have to figure out a way to fund the transportation budget. Then you've also got the Medicaid budget, which is always a big costly thing. So I'm just saying you're a small piece of a really large pot, but do not underestimate how critical it is that you contact your legislators. As you know, this is a very slippery slope. If they take away your board, the next thing that's going to happen, this is very scary as well, and it's goofy. After all these boards would be consolidated, and then you only get to meet at the chair, at the whim of the chair, or if the majority of people on the board decide they want to have a meeting, how often do you think that you would be meeting? And seriously, the complaints that were from the massage therapy board, I mean, those were some serious charges that were brought against people. In some cases, they needed the continuing education, and other cases not. But he then has a separate proposal that says he's going to appoint a bunch of people to a council, and they get to come forth with a whole bunch of recommendations of professions that need to be completely delicensed, and they have to present this to the legislature with an up or down vote, and the legislature cannot amend it. That is crazy. You could be in that soup pot. But I believe that the legislature is going to remove that for sure, because they're saying, how can the governor tell us that we can't amend a piece of legislation? We're elected officials too. The most important thing right now, it is so critical that you save your licensing board. It is so critical, so critical. So you need to make a lot of noise. The budget bill, they're going to have hearings this month. They're going to start voting May 3rd in the Joint Finance Committee. We still really don't know what the Assembly is doing. We think they may work off the 2015-16 budget, in which case the message would be keep the status quo. If it's working off the Senate budget, then we have to get an amendment to take it out to return to the status quo. And I'm really concerned about the messaging, and so when this all gets really specific and you hear something from Lynn, you really have to act, and you have to make sure that other people are acting. I would say you can send an email, but there's so many emails, you could get bogged down, and they may never get to your email. There's nothing like a phone call yet or a handwritten letter, if you can do that. And if they get 10 letters in an office from a massage therapist, or someone who has benefited from the services of a massage therapist, get some of your clients to write letters on your behalf, huge. They want real people. They want real people. Part of the messaging that I'm doing is going through the legislature saying, are you kidding me? Here you are on the one hand, and one of my other clients is chiefs of police. So I'll say, human trafficking is on the rise in this state. You've got all these drug problems. We just recently licensed the massage therapists, and if you look at the very fine job that they're doing, weeding out the bad actors, why would you want to make it easy for someone to set up shop? Why would you want to do that? And that's exactly what's going to happen. Now, that's a little bit maybe off message from what you all want to hear, but at the end of the day, we need 9 votes on the Joint Finance Committee to pull this out. After it leaves the Joint Finance Committee, even though it will go to the Senate and it'll go to the Assembly and they'll have their little caucuses and decide, okay, we can support this or that, My sense is right now today that if whatever comes out of the Joint Finance Committee is going to be the budget. There could be some tinkering around the edges a little bit, but that is where communication from Lynn at important points in time, I'm just going to really encourage you to read it because it will be time sensitive. And if there's a call to action, you cannot set it aside. You really have to make that call. So with that, I'm going to stop right now and just, is this clear? And if, are there any questions? Yes.
When was the meeting for the Joint Finance Committee? Your third or
May
something?
3rd.
Well, they're going to start voting on May 3rd, and they don't really have the schedule yet, but just, it's quite possible. This is where your day starts at 10 in the morning and you get done at 2 in the morning. And you have to be paying attention, because if you're not paying attention, something is done to you. Yes?
Now, it's my understanding what you're saying is that we are controlled by this finance committee.
Everybody is controlled, all the language here. The governor's budget bill is ballpark about 2,000 pages, okay? So the pages that you care about are on page 30, 31, and then it switches over to a different section of his budget bill on pages 59, I pulled all this stuff out, okay?
But we are controlled by that finance committee, right?
Yes.
And other organizations are also.
The only show in town is the Joint Finance Committee.
So why would it be beneficial for us to contact them also?
They want to hear from constituents. So if you are a constituent of a member of the Joint Finance Committee, absolutely contact them. They are also in a leadership role, which is why the white paper that your association has prepared is given to them. But these 16 members of the Joint Finance Committee, and this is where we're getting into the weeds a little bit, but they all have what is known as a budget buddy. So, and the Republicans control everything. So, in some cases they want to say it's a bipartisan effort, so it's nice to have some Democrats on board, but the Democrats are so far in the minority. The name of the game this time around, we have a Republican governor, and both houses are wildly in the majority with the Republican Party. So those of you who have Republican senator or state representative, those are the one to contact. Those people need to be talking to they're assigned to a legislator on the Joint Finance Committee to come and bring their concerns. So those people need to be saying to their budget buddy, one of the 16 members of the Joint Finance Committee, wow, I am hearing from so many massage therapists in my district, oh my goodness. And I've heard from optometrists, I've heard from, there's 7,000 radiologic technicians. Imagine when they get on fire. So no legislator wants to have 36,000 licensed professionals angry at them running for re-election. And the letterhead, I don't know, Lynn, if that is something that can be shared with everybody, with all the groups on there.
It's on our website.
Okay.
And a copy is on the government relations table upstairs.
Please look at that. That really caught members of the Joint Finance Committee. They were surprised because we pulled this together in about 48 hours. We had one meeting, everybody got their logos, we did a couple of drafts, and this is public safety to retain this. There is not a huge cost savings to the state of Wisconsin. And there is simply no way with these various health professions that anyone is going to feel comfortable commenting on a scope of practice for another profession. You're just not going to do it. So where is the public going to be served? So this, you've got the physical therapists, we've got the occupational therapists, the optometrists, the radiologic technicians, physician assistants, your association, AMTA, Physical Therapy Association, and the athletic trainers. And I think we were missing a couple just because we couldn't get their logos in time. And we're like, this is going to print. Because this was distributed Monday morning to every single legislator in the state capitol. And so it's fantastic. And then it was hand delivered to the members of the Joint Finance Committee. So it was fantastic. when the co-chair of the Joint Finance Committee held up this letter like this, and he said, ooh, we have a lot of angry people with this proposal in the budget. That isn't good for us. So now it is our job to keep hammering on, and I think your particular profession is very unique. The other thing that I will tell you, there was an article, it's the Wisconsin Public Research Institute, and they were quoting a massage therapist who was saying that the cost of getting continuing education was so prohibitive and awful that it was very hard to be a massage therapist. So you will see in your white paper that we address that. Some of your CE credits, besides being free, they're as low as $2, et cetera, et cetera. And we also, I think when you're talking, if you get a chance to talk to somebody, whether it's the legislator or staff, and keep in mind, staff a lot of times are the one really influencing their boss. And so it's very important if you're talking to a staff person to explain why you do the training that you do. You have a do no harm qualification as well. And so I think it's really important, and you've made this investment in this profession. And so you don't want bad actors in there who aren't invested the way you are. And I keep thinking, are we going to keep dumbing down our state and deregulating everybody and making this the wild, wild west again? It's ridiculous. Are they going to now say that someone who wants to be a physician doesn't have to, go through all the training that they do? One of my other clients is CPAs. We are the only state in the country that does not require CPAs to get continuing education. And I said, how can a CPA keep up on the ever-changing tax laws at the state and federal level if they're not getting continuing education? I don't want them to be my CPA. Just like if someone is not a licensed massage therapist that I know is keeping up with their continuing education as technology evolves and as you learn new things about body parts, etc., I don't want to go to them. So we are on a race to the bottom if this goes forward. And that is what you have to convey. I keep saying, what is the problem that needed to be fixed here? There was no problem. All the boards are doing a phenomenal job. These are volunteers who are so committed to their professions. I think they can charge for mileage. This is not a big ticket item. Plus you have licensing fees that would pay for that.
I was wondering what the name of the bill was.
Well, the governor's budget bill is Senate Bill 30.
Thank you.
And because Governor Walker probably anticipated that he was going to have problems with the speaker, he chose to not refer it to the assembly first. We still really don't know if there's going to be a Senate bill and if the assembly is going to work to amend the Senate bill, or if they're going to say, oh, thank you for that budget bill, we don't really care about that. We're going to create our own bill. The thing that scares me is this is how you end up with conference committees. You've got two completely separate silos, two different documents, and they end up appointing leaders from both houses, and then they just start horse trading. If you give me this, I'll give you that. That to me is very scary. So, but we still really don't know. We just don't know what's going to happen. But your window of time here is really just a couple of months to really kick the tires up and make your voices heard. Now we are talking, and there's no definitive answer yet, but as soon as I know anything, I will be telling Lynn this. We're seeing, could we try to get a lobby day that first week of May and get all of these professions to come to the Capitol on one day? That, as a collective force, would be unbelievable. And all you'd have to say is, keep the law the same. I mean, you're not going to have to even get really deep into the arguments, because they would just see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people coming. That would be a very powerful message. So I called on that today, and the person who was sort of trying to corral everybody, I just have not heard back from her. So it's a crazy time, though. This is your time, though, to be noisy. Noisy. Very noisy. And if you don't know who your legislator is, I believe you've got something on your website. You just plug in your zip code and it'll give you your senator and your assembly person. And you may decide you want to use your home address. You may decide you want to get 2 bangs for the buck. Maybe you want to use your employment address because maybe the way the lines are really gerrymandered for some districts, you might get someone completely different. I'm not going to say to you don't send an email, but can you imagine if you're a legislative office and everybody's contacting you? What if they have 2,000 or 3,000 emails in one day? How do you know they're going to get to yours? So I think sending something in the mail, or just pick up the phone and call them and say, who may I send this to? And if you actually talk to a staff person, what would be so fantastic, that would really help me in the job I'm trying to do for you, is if you leave a message, just say, well, I would really love to hear back from Representative so-and-so or Senator so-and-so, and I'd love to know where they stand on this position. And make them call you back, or give them your email and say, gosh, would you mind shooting me an email? I would just, it would just be nice to know. It's okay to ask for that. And always be nice